It was a quiet afternoon. The sun was high, and people walked in and out of the big shopping mall. Cars came and went. Children laughed near the fountain. Everything felt normal. Then came the sound. A short, sharp beep. It was the sound of a car unlocking. Not loud, but clear. A black woman in her late 20s stood beside a black luxury car. Her name was Rachel Adams. She was calm, well-dressed, and holding shopping bags in one hand. In her other hand was a smart key. She smiled softly. She had just finished shopping for her niece's birthday. She looked around, then opened the door of her car. And that's when trouble started. Across the lot, Officer Brad Turner sat inside his patrol car. He had been parked there for almost 20 minutes, watching people. He didn't see Rachel enter the mall. He didn't know who she was. But when he saw her unlocking that shiny black car, he frowned. "She doesn't look like she owns that," he muttered. His partner, Officer Mike, was sipping coffee beside him. "Leave it, Brad," Mike said. "She's just getting in her car." Brad shook his head. "No, something's not right." He got out of the car and walked fast across the parking lot. Rachel placed her bags in the back seat. She closed the door and was about to sit in the driver's seat when she heard the words, "Step away from the car, hands where I can see them." She turned quickly. A police officer was walking toward her with a hard look on his face. His hand was on his belt. Rachel froze. "Is something wrong, officer?" "That's not your car," Brad said sharply. "Tell me the truth. Where are the real keys?" Rachel blinked. "These are the real keys. This is my car." But Brad didn't listen. "I don't believe you. Step away now." Rachel took a deep breath. She raised both hands slowly, showing the keys. "I have my ID in my purse. I can show you," she said calmly. Brad pulled out his handcuffs. "Save the story. Turn around." "Please, officer," Rachel said. "There's a mistake." Brad moved fast. He grabbed her arm and locked the cuffs around her wrists. A small crowd started to gather. A teenage boy nearby pulled out his phone and started recording. A woman shouted. She didn't do anything. Rachel stood still. Her hands were now behind her back. Her face was calm, but her eyes showed pain. Not fear, just disappointment. "You're going to regret this," she said softly. Brad smirked. "Yeah. Why's that?" Rachel looked him in the eye. "Because you don't know who I am." Back at the station, Officer Brad wrote his report. Black female suspect. Age 28 to 30. Attempted vehicle theft. Did not cooperate. He placed the report on the desk with a smile. Meanwhile, Rachel sat in a cold cell with metal bars. She was alone. No phone. No ID. No words. She didn't shout. She didn't scream. She waited. A young officer named Tim Carter, fresh out of training, passed by the front desk. He glanced at Rachel's file and felt uneasy. He picked up her purse from the evidence shelf and quietly checked the ID. "Rachel Adams," he read aloud. He paused. That name. He typed it into the computer. Then he stopped breathing for a second. Rachel Adams. Federal judge, U.S. District Court. Former military legal advisor. Graduate, Harvard Law. Guest speaker, FBI Academy. Award winner. Justice for All Foundation. Tim's hands began to shake. He ran to the captain's office. "Sir," he said quickly, "we've made a huge mistake." Inside the cell, Rachel closed her eyes. Her breathing was steady. She knew this day might come. It had come for many others like her. But she also knew, this time, it would not end the same. She whispered, "They'll find out soon. Very soon." Outside, the video of her arrest had already hit the internet. The caption read, "Black woman arrested for stealing her own car?" It was spreading fast. And in just a few hours, the world would know who Rachel Adams really was. Officer Tim Carter stood in front of the captain's desk. His face was pale. His hands shook as he held the printed record. "Captain Miller," he said, voice low but serious, "we arrested the wrong person. Her name is Rachel Adams." The captain raised an eyebrow. "And?" Tim placed the paper in front of him. "She's not just anyone. She's a federal judge, a former military legal officer. She works with the FBI. She gives lectures at law schools. She's someone important. Captain Miller's eyes widened. You're sure? Yes, sir. 100%. The captain stood up so fast his chair almost fell back. Get her out of that holding cell. Now. In the small cell, Rachel sat with her hands resting on her lap. She looked calm but tired. When the door opened, she looked up slowly. It was Officer Tim. Ma'am, I'm so sorry, he said gently. We made a mistake, a big one. Rachel said nothing. She stood up and walked out without a word. As she stepped into the hallway, everyone stopped to stare. Some officers lowered their eyes. Others whispered to each other. She didn't yell. She didn't cry. She simply said, I would like to speak to your captain. In the captain's office, Rachel sat across from Captain Miller. Her face showed quiet strength. Her voice was cold, but polite. I was arrested without being asked for my ID, she said. I was handcuffed in public, humiliated in front of strangers, and thrown in a cell. Captain Miller wiped sweat from his forehead. Judge Adams, I deeply apologize. We didn't know. That's the problem, Rachel said. You didn't want to know. You saw my skin before you saw my name. The room went silent. Meanwhile, Officer Brad Turner was still writing follow-up notes on his report. He hadn't seen Rachel leave the cell. He hadn't seen the video that was now everywhere. But then his phone buzzed. One new message. You're trending, bro. For the wrong reasons. He opened the video. It showed him, shouting at Rachel, handcuffing her, ignoring her calm words. Under the video, the comments were filled with fire. This is racism, plain and simple. She's a federal judge. Are you kidding me? Fire that cop. Brad's heart sank. Back in the captain's office, Rachel stood up. I don't want excuses, she said. I want action. I want change. And I want a public apology. Yes, ma'am, the captain said quickly. We'll do whatever it takes. Rachel looked at him one last time. I don't need your kindness, she said. I need your justice. She walked out of the station with her head high. Outside, reporters were already waiting. Microphones, cameras, questions. Judge Adams, what happened? Did they really arrest you for your own car? Do you plan to sue? Rachel didn't stop, but she said one clear sentence. They arrested me because they refused to see the truth. But now, the whole world sees it. At home, Rachel finally sat on her sofa. Her phone buzzed nonstop. Messages from friends, emails from officials, calls from the media. Her name was now everywhere. But she wasn't happy. She wasn't proud. She was hurt and tired. She looked at a photo on her wall. It showed her younger self in uniform, standing with her military team. You fought for justice, she whispered. Now, you'll fight again. That night, the police department held an emergency meeting. Officer Brad was called into the captain's office. You're being put on immediate leave, the captain said, until we finish the investigation. Brad looked down. But sir. No, the captain said. There's video. There's a public outcry. You didn't ask for IT. You made assumptions. Now we all pay the price. Brad left the room in silence. Across town, Rachel began to write, not a legal paper, not a court order, but a public letter. A message to everyone who had ever been treated like she was. Her voice would now be louder than ever. 3 days after her arrest, Rachel Adams sat at her desk. Her hands were calm, but her heart was full of emotion. In front of her was a white sheet of paper. She took a deep breath and started writing. She didn't write like a judge. She wrote like a human being. Her words were not full of legal terms or big language. They were simple. They were real. To every person who was ever judged by their color before their character, she began. My name is Rachel Adams. I am a federal judge. I serve my country as a military legal officer. I fight for justice every single day. But 3 days ago, I was treated like a criminal because of the color of my skin. I was not asked questions. I was not offered respect. I was handcuffed. I was humiliated. I was silenced. This is not just my story. This is the story of many. She wrote about her past. She told how her father once sat in a jail cell for a crime he didn't commit. How her mother had to teach her at age 10 what to do if stopped by police. How she had spent her whole life fighting for fairness in a world that still refused to see her clearly. She didn't ask for revenge. She asked for change. And then she ended the letter with this line: "Respect should not depend on race. Justice should not depend on fear. And truth should never be ignored." Rachel sent the letter to one news outlet. Just one. She went to sleep that night without checking her phone. By morning, the letter was everywhere. On news channels, on social media, on the front page of major newspapers. People around the country shared her words with the tag, #See Her Clearly. In schools, teachers read her letter out loud. In offices, people cried while reading it at their desks. Even police departments in other states shared the letter with their officers as a learning tool. For the first time, people didn't just see Rachel as a name. They saw her as a person. Meanwhile, inside the police station, Captain Miller called an emergency meeting. Officers sat quietly as the captain read Rachel's letter out loud. When he finished, no one spoke. Even Officer Brad Turner sat in the back, staring at the ground. The captain finally said, "This is a moment to learn. We cannot erase what happened, but we can make sure it never happens again." He turned to Brad. "What do you have to say for yourself?" Brad stood up slowly. "I was wrong," he said. "I judged her without knowing anything. I didn't see a judge. I only saw a black woman getting into a nice car." A heavy silence filled the room. Later that day, Rachel received a phone call. It was from the governor's office. "Judge Adams," the voice said, "we would be honored if you could speak at our upcoming law enforcement conference. We need your voice, now more than ever." Rachel paused, then said quietly, "I will speak, not just for me, but for everyone like me." At the same time, the teenager who had recorded the arrest posted another video. This time, he spoke directly to the camera. "This happened in front of me. I saw how calm she was. I saw how the officer ignored her words. That's why I recorded it, and I'm glad I did." The video went viral. More and more people started sharing their own stories. People of all ages, all races, all voices. Rachel sat on her couch that evening, reading message after message. A young girl wrote, "I want to be a judge like you one day." An old man wrote, "Your letter made me cry. I was in jail once for nothing. Thank you for speaking up." Rachel wiped a tear from her eye. For the first time in days, she smiled. She knew the fight was not over, but she also knew she had turned her pain into purpose, her silence into strength. And now, the world was finally listening. The large hall was full of people, officers, leaders, reporters, and students. Everyone was waiting for Judge Rachel Adams to arrive. Some sat quietly, others whispered about the letter that changed so many hearts. The banner at the front read, "Law Enforcement Conference, Building Trust, Changing the System." At exactly 10 o'clock a.m., Rachel walked onto the stage. She wore a simple dark suit. She didn't smile. She didn't wave. She stood behind the podium, looked at the crowd, and paused. The silence in the room was heavy. Then she spoke, clearly, calmly, and with strength. "I was handcuffed because someone saw my skin before my face," she said. "I was arrested because someone didn't ask, or me assumed. I was judged, not by the law, but by fear." People shifted in their seats. Some nodded. Some lowered their eyes. Rachel continued, "But I am not here to speak about anger. I am here to speak about truth." She told her full story. How she served in the military. How she became one of the youngest federal judges in her state. How she had once trained officers about law and fairness. And yet, she said, none of that mattered when I stood next to my car. She turned to the row of officers sitting in the front. "This is not just about one officer. This is about a system that fails to ask questions and too quickly gives answers." The crowd listened, completely silent. Even Officer Tim Carter, sitting in the third row, felt something heavy in his chest. He had been the one to let Rachel out of the cell. He remembered her silence, her dignity. He wished he had acted sooner. Rachel looked across the room and asked one question. How many people are in jail today? Not because they are guilty, but because they were never seen clearly. No one answered. Because they couldn't. After the speech, the audience stood and clapped. Not for show, but with real respect. Some clapped with tears in their eyes. Others looked at Rachel with something new in their faces, understanding. She didn't stay for pictures. She walked off the stage, back into the quiet hallway. But what she left behind in that room would never be forgotten. Later that day, the news channels were full of her speech. One reporter said, she didn't just speak to the police, she spoke to all of us. Social media exploded again. Hashtag See Her Clearly became more than a hashtag. It became a movement. Across the country, police stations began organizing their own meetings. Some officers wrote public letters, promising to do better. Some towns asked Rachel to help train their officers. But not everyone was happy. In the corner of a dark office, Officer Brad Turner watched her speech on TV. His face was tight. His career was on the line. His name was still trending, but not in a good way. He turned off the TV and muttered, "She ruined me." But deep down he knew. He ruined himself. Meanwhile, Rachel sat in her living room with her best friend Maya, who had flown in to support her. "I don't even know if I'm making a difference," Rachel said softly. Maya smiled. "Rachel, look at your phone." Rachel picked it up. There was a message from a police chief in another state. "We want your help to fix what's broken." Another from a university. "Please speak to our law students. We want them to hear your story." And one from a woman in her 70s. "You spoke for people like me who were never heard." Rachel looked at the messages and felt something warm in her chest. It wasn't pride. It was hope. Maybe, just maybe, this painful moment was turning into something powerful. As the sun set, Maya asked, "What now?" Rachel looked out the window and said, "Now, I keep going, because this isn't about me anymore." Officer Brad Turner couldn't sleep. Every night, he stared at the ceiling, hearing Rachel's words in his head. He remembered her face the day he arrested her. She didn't scream. She didn't fight. She just looked at him. And that look, it had stayed with him. Not angry, not scared, just disappointed. That look hurt more than 1,000 angry words. Brad had been a cop for 12 years. He always believed he was fair. He thought he followed the rules. But that day he didn't. He saw a black woman getting into a nice car. He didn't ask questions. He just assumed. Now, the whole country knew his name, for the wrong reason. His captain, James Miller, had already given him a warning. "Brad," he said, "you broke procedure. You embarrassed this department. And worse, you broke someone's trust." "I know," Brad whispered. "You're on probation now, and maybe you deserve that. But the real question is, what are you going to do with this moment?" The words hit Brad hard. That night, he opened his laptop. He started watching videos of people who had faced the same thing Rachel faced. Men wrongly arrested. Women treated like criminals because of how they looked. He read about children growing up afraid of police. And then he saw something that made him freeze. It was an interview with Rachel. She said, "I don't want him punished. I want him to learn, because only learning can bring change." The next morning, Brad walked into the police station early. He asked the captain, "Can I speak to the team today?" At roll call, Captain Miller raised an eyebrow. "You sure?" Brad nodded. "Yes, I need to." At 8:00 a.m., the room was full. Officers sat with their coffee, chatting. Then the captain stepped up. "Listen up. Officer Turner wants to speak." Everyone turned. Brad stood in front of them. He looked nervous, but his voice was steady. "I want to talk about what I did," he began. "I arrested a woman without asking her name. I treated her like a criminal before I knew the truth. That woman was Judge Rachel Adams." The room was quiet now. Brad took a breath. "I've made arrests before. I've followed orders. But this time, I followed fear." Some officers looked uncomfortable, but Brad kept going. "She didn't yell. She didn't blame me. But she taught me more in one look than I've learned in 12 years on the job." He looked at his team. I thought being a good cop meant being fast, strong, tough. But maybe it's about being careful, human, fair. He paused. I was wrong, and I'm sorry. Silence. Then one officer, Maria Lopez, slowly clapped. Others followed. It wasn't loud, but it was real. Brad stepped back, his hands shaking. But for the first time since the arrest, he felt a little lighter. That afternoon, Brad walked into a school. He had been invited to speak to high school students about justice and learning from mistakes. When he entered, he saw a woman standing near the front. His heart skipped. It was Rachel. She was talking to the students, smiling. Brad stayed quiet, standing in the back. After the session, Rachel turned and saw him. Their eyes met. She gave a small nod. Not warm, not cold, just calm. He walked up slowly. Judge Adams, he said, I came to listen and to say thank you. Rachel looked at him. Her voice was soft. You don't need to thank me. You need to keep learning, keep growing. That's how we move forward. Brad nodded. I will, I promise. She held out her hand. He shook it. And in that small moment, something changed. They were no longer cop and victim. They were two people. Two Americans, trying to fix something broken. Rachel sat in her office, reading emails from strangers, some full of support, some full of anger. One message said, thank you for your courage. You made me believe in justice again. Another one said, stop talking about race. You're just making it worse. Rachel sighed. She was tired, but not of fighting. She was tired of being misunderstood. That evening, she got a phone call from a young officer named Dallin Ross. Judge Adams, he said, nervously, I know you don't know me, but I saw your interview. I want to be the kind of cop people trust. Rachel smiled. Then start by seeing people as people, she said, not as problems. Dallin paused, then asked, would you ever consider training new officers? Like, in person? Rachel didn't answer right away, but something about his voice, so honest, so hopeful, made her say yes. 1 week later, Rachel stood inside a large police academy classroom. She looked around. About 40 officers in uniform sat quietly. Some looked curious. Some looked uncomfortable. Some looked like they didn't want to be there at all. Rachel began with a question. What is justice? A young officer raised his hand. Justice is following the law? Rachel smiled lightly. That's part of it. But justice is also about understanding, about listening before acting. Then she walked slowly across the room. She said, do you know what it feels like to be pulled over, not because you did something wrong, but because someone doesn't trust how you look? The room went still. No one answered. Rachel's voice softened. That happened to me. A judge, a veteran, a citizen, and no one asked me one simple question. Is this your car? The officers listened closely now. She didn't speak with anger. She spoke with truth. After the session, many came to thank her, even the ones who looked unsure at first. But one officer, Officer Harper, waited until the room was nearly empty. He walked up to Rachel and said, I've been a cop for 20 years. I thought I knew everything, but you made me realize I've been missing something important. Rachel nodded. It's never too late to learn. Meanwhile, across the city, a group of reporters were digging deeper into the story. They discovered something shocking. Rachel had actually helped design the training program for that very police department years ago. She had trained officers about bias and justice. And yet, one of their own arrested her without cause. The irony was painful and powerful. One reporter, Linda Shaw, released a video. The judge they arrested helped build their training program. It went viral, over 10 million views in 2 days. People were stunned. The woman who was disrespected by police had once taught them how to respect others. In city halls and police stations across the country, the video sparked new conversations. Police chiefs began asking hard questions. How many other people were treated unfairly? How many stories had gone unseen, unheard? Back in her office, Rachel received a letter from a girl named Zara, only 12 years old. It said, "Dear Judge Adams, I'm scared to be black sometimes. But when I saw you on TV, I felt brave. Thank you for not giving up." Rachel held the letter to her chest, her eyes filled with tears. That's when she knew. This was never just about her. This was about all the people who felt small and needed to feel seen. That night, as Rachel sat by her window, she thought about the badge. The one Brad wore when he arrested her. The one so many people feared. And she whispered to herself, a badge should protect, not divide. Somewhere far away, Officer Brad Turner looked at his own badge. He had placed a small sticker behind it. It said, "See the soul, not the skin." The city was changing, slowly, painfully, but it was changing. And Rachel was leading the way. It was a bright, sunny morning. The city hall was full of people, judges, police officers, students, teachers, and reporters. Everyone had come for one reason. Today, the city would honor someone who had turned pain into change, someone who stood up with calm strength, someone who forgave but never stayed silent. Rachel stood behind the stage, quietly looking at the crowd. She was dressed simply, with her silver judge's pin on her coat. Next to her was Officer Brad Turner, now a changed man. He had been invited too, not as a cop, but as a witness to what true courage looked like. Mayor Angela Green stepped up to the microphone. She looked at the crowd and said, "Today, we gather not to talk about a mistake, but to celebrate what came after. One woman chose grace instead of anger, truth instead of revenge. And now, because of her, this city is better." The crowd clapped. Some people stood. Rachel felt her chest tighten. She had been strong in court, on TV, and in front of officers, but today, her hands were shaking. Mayor Green continued. Her story reminded us that justice isn't about power, it's about people. She reminded us that a uniform doesn't make someone right, and that silence never makes things better. Then she looked at Rachel. "Judge Rachel Adams, please come forward." Rachel walked to the podium slowly. The room stood in silence, waiting for her words. She took a breath and spoke softly, but clearly. "I never wanted attention. I didn't ask to be a symbol. I was just a woman trying to go home." She paused. "That day, I was treated like a criminal. But even worse, I was treated like I didn't belong. And I know I'm not the only one." Some people in the crowd nodded, eyes full of emotion. Rachel continued, "I'm not here today because I was hurt. I'm here because I chose to heal. I chose to help others see what they couldn't before." Then she looked straight at the officers sitting in the front row. "I'm not your enemy. I'm your teacher, your neighbor, your sister in this community. I don't want revenge. I want better." As she stepped away from the podium, the crowd rose. A standing ovation. Cheers filled the room. Some were crying. Others simply clapped with deep respect. Later that afternoon, a special ceremony was held. The city named a new program after her, the Rachel Adams Justice Initiative. It would focus on training police on fairness and bias, supporting victims of wrongful treatment, teaching students about respect and law. Outside City Hall, a small bronze statue was placed in the garden. It wasn't big or flashy. It showed a woman standing tall, holding a law book in one hand and a heart in the other. At the bottom it said, "She turned pain into purpose, Judge Rachel Adams." A year passed. Rachel became a guest speaker in universities and police departments across the country. Her story was added to school textbooks. Her face was shown in classrooms as someone who changed the system with calm, courage, and truth. One day, she visited a school in a small town. A little black girl walked up to her, holding a notebook. "Are you the lady who changed the police?" Rachel smiled gently. "No, sweetheart. I'm the lady who reminded them who they're supposed to be." Far away, in a quiet neighborhood, Brad Turner helped a young recruit learn the ropes. He spoke gently, carefully. And every time he saw someone treated unfairly, he stepped in, just like Rachel had taught him. Back in her quiet home, Rachel placed the little girl's drawing on her wall. It showed a woman in a dress and glasses, standing between a police car and a family. Below the picture were 4 words written in crayon. "You made us safe." Rachel smiled, not because her name was in history books now, but because she had made a difference in the hearts of people. And that was more powerful than any court decision.